Hello, friends. Mirabai and Willow here. And Willow's been talking for quite some time with me, just mentioning now and then that it would be really great if we could offer some extra support to y'all around anniversaries and what that brings up for us in times of loss, even if the time is long past. And so this little video is our offering to you. See if it helps you know that you're not alone when you're going through either the unexpected or the expected uh, feelings around anniversaries.
Yeah, thank you, Mirabai. And it's something that I see a lot in my own grief journey and in those around me around the anticipation or experience of anniversaries. Also, often it's related to death of loved ones, birthdays, death dates, holidays. And it can also, come up with separations from partners and their birthday or their parents' birthday or um, yeah, just people that were once in our life in a certain way that are no longer in that way. And there are anniversaries or times of year that we are especially reminded of that. And it might be a painful experience. It might not, but just some thoughts of how we often navigate it in our own experience is what we're here to share. And both of us actually just had
Right.
some significant anniversaries, and we want to chat with you about that because they feel fresh.
Yeah, we can even just use those as examples. I mean, they both have to do with death, the death of a mother and the death of a daughter. As Willow said, the feelings arise in response to all kinds of losses, not just loss through death, but these two examples are. So it's been 22 years since my daughter Jenny died, and some years have been easier than others in terms of the I don't want to say triggers, catalysts for cascades of feelings. Sometimes the birthday, sometimes the death day, sometimes neither, sometimes both. This year, I expected neither. I thought we'd just sort of sail through. It was Jenny's 37th birthday. She died when she was 14. 37, 36. Yeah, 37. And I thought, okay, this is sort of not a very special number. And I think I've got this. I'm working with the Holy Lament community. How hard could it be? And so I was kind of blindsided by the pain of that day. It was a very quiet pain, it was very private. I found myself just wanting to be alone. And I found out later, well, I found out, I think, that evening that Willow had gone to Jenny's grave because she's buried at Lama Foundation, and Willow happened to be there. It's way up in the mountains, it's kind of hard to get to. And she went to Jenny's grave. She found it, which is difficult because it's kind of in a wilderness area. It's a long story. And she found it and she sang Jenny a happy birthday song and she laid a flower on her grave. And so, what I want to say is, other people can help you carry those moments that weigh a lot. It's sometimes too hard to carry yourself, or you just can't deal with it, or you weren't even anticipating it. But other people knowing and loving the one who's gone really just helps so much in lifting the burden on the heart. So yeah, that was my recent
Yeah.
anniversary that I wasn't expecting to feel so deeply.
And I know your mama brought you roses too
Oh
that day.
yes, my mom did, and in our family we always do a cupcake or a cake. Whichever family members can get together. Often, many of us, sometimes just one or two of us, and we do a cake for Jenny, and sing her happy birthday and blow out the candles. That helps a lot. These simple little
Mm-hmm.
rituals. Willow and I are big believers in rituals. You can make it up. It can be silly. It can be serious, but something that marks the day. My friend Jenny Bird, who was my little Jenny's godmother, came over and just brought flowers, but then didn't just bring flowers. She gathered a candle from a shelf in my house, put it next to the flowers, and grabbed a picture of Jenny, they're all over the house, and put that, and all made this makeshift altar and lit the candle and incense. And in that moment, there was an honoring of the day that I wasn't expecting, but that helped so much. So the thing is, we can't do this all alone. I mean, we can and people do, but it's not necessary. You've got this wild heart community. You have lots of siblings right here you can call upon, and people that you know in this circle who need support in navigating their special days. And sometimes it's simply a matter of pulling it together just enough to reach out to your community, whether this online community or your family or people, friends, people in your life, to say, you know, I've got a big one coming up, and I feel a little shaky, and I could really use some love for to get across this threshold. You know, can you help me? Can you support me? Even just tell me a story about my loved one that you remember. Really, anything helps. And also to offer yourself to others who you know may be approaching one of those threshold moments.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in. We really do need each other. And, you know, for me, I just passed the 10-year anniversary of my mama's death. And actually, it happens that she died on September 1st and her birthday is September 9th. So there's this really potent time in between those dates, too, that just feels, yeah, extra strong. And this year, you know, I was anticipating it as 10 years. Like, this is a big anniversary. And for me, it's felt important to be proactive in some way, that there's a way I know I can honor her on that day so that I'm not just alone, sad, without anywhere to bring that energy. And so for me, it's like my go to is to make her favorite meal and put out a plate for her and honor her through food, because that's so much of how she took care of me. And then it's also through her jewelry. I actually almost wore her necklace. I didn't do it. It's a very dramatic necklace, but I have her one ring, and often I'll put on more of her jewelry on a day that I miss her. And that's like holidays, birthday, you know, anything where I'm just like wanting more of that connection. It just feels like I need to be more conscious about it. And actually, this year, my beloved, my partner, suggested that we plant a tree for her, which felt like a really sweet idea. Again, like we need those people around us to remind us too of other ways, and that was a really gorgeous ceremony to be able to do that. But what I'll say is that, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about this together, is just the anticipation, right? Of like thinking, okay, I want to be prepared so that I have some things in place that I know can take good care of me. I also went to a grief ritual that weekend. And also, I'm open to the fact that it might not be really hard. Like, I want to remain open to that. And I kind of honestly expected that this year. And I got there and I was like, oh, I had so much resistance to the grief that was actually coming up. And I heard myself going, Willow, you're always telling people not to resist the grief. And here I am doing it, you know? I'm thinking, oh, it's been 10 years. This isn't a fresh loss anymore. Like, what are you doing grieving again? And just realizing, oh, wow, it's different every year. Like, now there's a whole other narrative of how long it's been. And yet there was this whole other facet of the grief of like, oh, I'm not just surviving my life without her. This is the rest of my life.
Right. I remember you having that insight. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living my life. And there's a grief in that.
Yeah.
There's a grief in no longer freshly grieving. And actually, that means, well, I am living my life now, and I'm living my life without that beloved in it. That is a whole new kind of grief that I think people don't speak about very often.
Yeah, and you know about that.
Yeah.
After 22 years. Well, maybe will you say a little bit about that first year, the morning ritual of the 1st year, and how we might continue that practice if we don't do it as you
within the first
did.
12 months? Yeah, as I did. Right. So I think many of you have heard me speak about growing up in a non-religious Jewish family. So I didn't know anything about Jewish rituals, really. You know, Passover at my grandparents once in a while. It was just a lot of food, and you know, I don't really remember much more about it. So I learned everything I know about Judaism later in life, mostly as a young adult. And but when Jenny died, I didn't know really anything about the Jewish mourning customs, but I knew that they existed and I wanted to know about them. So I learned about them. I did a quick crash course by asking friends, and people gathered at our home to do the Kaddish with us every evening for 7 nights, as the sun went down, which is the Jewish mourner's prayer. So I was very blessed that way, that I was able to pull together a community that could hold me in my ancestral tradition, among other traditions that we also wove into that period, by the way. But then I learned that there is a 1 year mourning cycle for people closest to the deceased. So, children of parents who died, parents of children who have died, and spouses primarily. And so I did a version of that, which is just to remove yourself from kind of mainstream activity for a whole year, to chant the Kaddish once a month on that anniversary date. So it was like, so Jenny died on October 30th. So at the 30th of every month, we would chant the mourner's prayer. And then to just not do new projects, new enterprises, new relationships, um, and to mostly avoid social occasions, parties and things like that, and to just turn inward. And you can't do that entirely. Most of us work for a living, but to the extent that you're able, if other people can do errands for you, wonderful, at least for a while. And that the whole idea is that you're directing your attention to the mourning, Mourning, the mourning as a sacred offering of love to your loved one. Now, so I was able to do that. If you're not able to do that, then don't feel bad. There are ways you can adapt these rituals to fit the shape of your real life. But if you have some kind of orientation, and even if it's been years ago that your great loss, your shattering loss happened, you can still do this 1 year mourning cycle starting now. Read up on it and see what parts of that container might help hold your heart going forward. So, because I had that year cycle in my mind, heart, and soul and body, there was an end to it, an end to the year, the actual yahrzeit or the anniversary. It's actually 11 months after the death. You do the unveiling of the gravestone. They call it the unveiling. And that's a very special ritual. But we made it all up, and Jenny's friends came and we played music, and I sang her a lullaby at her grave, and the lullaby I sang to her when she was a little girl. And um, again, we made that up too, drumming, and it was really beautiful. We had a procession to her grave. You could do it whatever you want, but on that date, there was a recognition that a sacred cycle was complete. Did that mean I wasn't allowed to be sad anymore? No, of course not. But it was a really important day. Then on the first year anniversary, actual first year anniversary, building up to it, I was so sad. I was like, I don't think I can do this. This is too hard. It is too painful. I was in the deepest grief I'd been in since Jenny died for that week leading up to the first anniversary. And then on the day of, it was beautiful. It was, my heart just lifted. I was telling Willow, it was like the clouds parted and the sun came flooding through and lit up everything. Everything was illuminated and holy and blessed and beautiful, drenched in beauty. And the people who gathered, it was a smaller group, mostly family and very closest friends, to honor Jenny's death. It was very sacred and comforting. It was a beautiful day, and it was a big turning point. But that's the other thing I want to say real quick, is that the first anniversary is important of a great loss, because you've gotten through all the firsts. Their first birthday, your first birthday without them, the holidays you shared together, all the different markers that you used to go through together. So no doubt about it, the first year is very special. But you're also kind of brain damaged the first year, and it's in some ways you're still numb. You're still in what we talk about, instead of denial, that in that shattering, and then what's the
Grace.
Grace. Thank you.
Grace.
Yeah. That there is a kind of altered state that we're in often for many months. And so sometimes the subsequent years can be even more, um, I don't know, potent or bright, or you can feel your feelings more. So,
Mm-hmm.
not to think that just because you get through all those firsts,
Mm-hmm.
it's smooth sailing. There are going anniversaries just can be very um, painful, maybe not even painful, just filled with feeling.
And sometimes surprising feeling, right? Like to me, that's one of the biggest things is to approach it with openness, preparedness, and also like curiosity of what might actually conspire. Like as much as we can plan for what might be there, again, the sun might burst through the clouds on a really cloudy, rainy day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And years later,
Mm-hmm.
it could just
Yeah.
sneak up on you, but they're
Exactly.
also comforting things years later. We were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about this, that some neighbors of mine that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know knew my stepfather he had actually worked for them at a certain point 20 something years ago. And just yesterday, so John died 2 years ago. And my mom is just beginning to come out of acute grief, and start to live again. And but when they told me that they knew him and they loved him, he was a really good guy, and they had some wonderful stories. And I said, "Would you go find my mom,
Mm-hmm.
at her gallery, and go in and tell her some of these stories, because I think it would mean a lot to her." And I mentioned it to her this morning because they just told me last night about this. I mentioned it to her this morning, that they knew him and they had stories about him, and her eyes just filled with tears. She said, "I would love to hear those stories." So be the storytellers for each other, my friends. If you know things about the loved ones of people who are
Mm-hmm.
mourning, even years later, tell
Yeah.
those stories. Stories are medicine.
Or ask for them. I mean, I ask my dad often.
Mm,
I'm like, can you tell me a story? Like, I need to, there's
mm,
always something surprising, right? Like all of these years later, I'm like, I never knew that, and it'll be a whole other side of her that I wouldn't have seen with her in the role she was in. But that's huge.
right.
I think for me also writing is so important. I
Mm.
I actually have an ongoing email thread that I still send her emails
Wow.
because there's something to me about being able to
That's so
be in correspondence to look back on them too, because I'll send like, I graduated from college, I wish you were here,
good.
and all these moments. And I wrote her a piece this year, of like all the places I see her. But yeah, just an ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
And I think what you touched on earlier is so important, of the making it up. I mean, we're both huge fans of ritual, and I feel like you just go with what feels the most alive in the moment. And maybe it's not what you expected it to be, but I believe you have the material that might create something meaningful and supportive in the anniversary time.
Beauty. Yeah, I know
Beauty,
you do.
yes, say about beauty. Because,
Beauty,
well,
beauty.
wait, will you talk about the birthday and death day
Yeah.
anniversaries for Jenny, and what you do for those days? Beauty, beauty, beauty.
Beauty, beauty, beauty. Yeah, so on Jenny's birthday, we go
Mm,
up to Lama, where her ashes are buried. We scattered her ashes in different places around the
mm,
world, but then half of them, and then the other half in this beautiful handmade raw silk box. No, handmade paper box that is meant to disintegrate with wildflower seeds embedded in it, um, and then a gravestone. We go up to the grave and decorate with beautiful colored stones, or we just fix it up and we rake it and we just beautify her grave. Such a simple thing. I think all traditions have a
mm,
version of this. It's for me, as an artist,
mm,
as an Enneagram 4 who lives for beauty, it's at Taurus. We're both Tauruses. There are lots of reasons that I love beauty,
mm,
and it makes me feel so much better to just do the simple act of beautifying her grave. On the day of her death, because she died in a car accident, um, there is a marker at her crash site. It's a beautiful Celtic cross that a friend made, and we painted with her name, and we decorate with plastic flowers. Don't know how environmentally responsible it is, but every year we drive up to the mountains, which is where it was, pretty remote mountain. Both her grave and her
mm-hmm.
crash site are in remote places, and we gather the old flowers and we decorate with new flowers, and it's become almost an ecstatic task. In fact, early on, I think I felt the joy in it. And then we take ourselves out to lunch at a sweet little cafe nearby, well, nothing's nearby. Jenny died in the middle of the wilderness, but about 20 minutes away, called Sugar Nymphs, and we have a nice meal, and it just becomes a very soothing and uplifting experience instead of devastating, or in addition to being devastating. I won't lie.
Yeah, absolutely. So perhaps there are some ideas that might, relate to your own experience, or just be able to support you as you approach these anniversaries in all of their shapes and forms, and also an invitation to bring yourself to this community space on those days. Share photos with us, share the experience, tell us stories, help us help you,
Yes.
and just know that you're not alone in it.
Yes. Thank you, Willow,
Yeah.
for thinking of this. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to name and hold
Yeah.
space for.
Yeah, and would love to hear your ways of honoring
Yeah.
these thresholds. Thank you.